His gloved fingers brushed something solid. He kept digging carefully, a little at a time. Definitely something there. Leaning closer to the ground, he focused the flashlight beam and pushed aside bits of crumbling leaf matter. A set of human teeth grinned up at him. Jesus Christ! He sat back on his heels. The skull was stained as dark as the earth, and a colony of lichen covered the forehead. Tom cleared off debris until the skull was fully exposed. The mandible was still attached. The lab would have a complete set of teeth to compare with dental records. "Welcome back to the world," Tom whispered. In the gaping eye sockets, he saw all the lonely seasons the bones had lain here under the trees. "Let's find out if you can tell us your name." He looked over his shoulder toward the clearing, where Dr. Gretchen Lauder, the medical examiner, was tagging and bagging everything the deputies uncovered. "Gretchen," Tom called, "I found the grand prize." The doctor, a small woman in her 50s, picked her way through underbrush to his side. Dennis joined them. Together they stood in silence for a moment, watching snow collect on the skull at their feet. A sour taste rose in Tom's throat. This was a hell of a way for anyone to end up. He'd seen bleeding bodies and dead ones in Richmond and here in Mason County, but nothing had ever gotten to him like this slow gathering of dismembered bones. All of them were darkened by exposure, and most bore the marks of wild animals' teeth. Gretchen tugged her knit cap lower over her salt and pepper curls. "Get some pictures before we move it." Dennis retrieved a small digital camera from inside his jacket and stooped to snap a few shots while Tom illuminated the skull with his flashlight. "Let's get it up," Gretchen said, "so I can have a closer look." When Tom lifted the skull, the mandible dropped off. "Aw, Christ. Not to worry." She scooped it up. "The human jaw doesn't break all that easily." Tom's gaze was riveted to the back of the skull he held. "What about the cranium? What would it take to cause this kind of damage?" He turned the skull, showing them the long cleft down the back, angled from the top past the right ear, opening to the base. "Holy crap," Dennis said. Gretchen pulled in a deep breath. "Oh, my Lord. First thing that comes to mind is an axe. It must have gone well into the brain." Tom fingered the split, and a shudder of horror moved through him. He imagined an axe blade slicing through scalp, cracking bone, coming to rest in the coils of the brain, obliterating with one blow every thought and emotion that had made the woman who she was. "No chance it's animal damage, or maybe it was caused by freezing and thawing?" Gretchen shook her head. "A break that long, that wide, not likely. I'm very much afraid you've got yourself a murder case." A knot tightened in Tom's gut. "But is it Pauline McClure?" "All I can give you is a guess," Gretchen said. "Let me look at the teeth." She examined the mandible, then handed the jawbone to Tom in exchange for the skull. "Not many people have as much dental work as Pauline did. I haven't seen her chart in 10 years, but I remember all these bridges and crowns. And you know what this is, don't you?" She ran a finger around a small, bony protrusion a couple of inches up from the base of the skull. Automatically, Tom's hand went to a similar lump of bone at the back of his own head, but when he realized what he was doing, he yanked his arm down. "Anatolian bump. The Melungeons are the only people around here who've got that, right?" Dennis said. Gretchen nodded. "And Pauline was Melungeon." "So it is her," Tom said. "She was lying up here all the time, just a few miles from her house. Well, my father nearly drove himself crazy trying to find her." If an out-of-state millionaire hadn't decided to build a vacation home on top of Indian Mountain, Pauline's bones might never have been found. Now she was Tom's problem. This wasn't the end of Pauline's story, a neat wrap-up of his father's work. This was the beginning of a murder investigation, and the case was as cold as the victim's bones. "I'll have to check the teeth against her dental records," Gretchen cautioned, "and the state lab will have to verify it." "Good God Almighty!" came a voice behind them. Tom turned to see Sheriff Toby Willingham.